The new luxury in the world right now is you not using AI. It's you slowing down and not being in a hurry. You may not need to become more polished in order to get your job. What you may need to do is stop fighting your natural style. Manufacturing a persona for yourself for job interviews is possibly the worst thing that you can do. We've spent years teaching professionals that credibility requires certainty, that senior people should always know what they're doing, and that you need to sound composed, sound polished, and completely assured of yourself. And the world has changed. If everything you do, everything you say, every email you send, all the interview answers that you provide, if that's all AI, what's luxurious? What seems unique? The scarce thing is now the human input. I had something completely different planned for you today, but plans changed at the last minute. So here we are today with a very different episode. And rather than scramble to replace it with something maybe overly produced or repeat an episode, I thought I'd do something a little different. And I haven't done it for quite some time, which to just sit here and have a chit chat with you. There are a few things that have been on my mind recently. I've been discussing them with clients, things I'm noticing in my own work and conversations that I have with recruiters as well, in the way that people are showing up professionally, and in the way I think our relationship is changing with our work, with our career plans, and I'm starting to see that shift. Maybe you are too. None of these ideas are fully formed, and that's probably why this is an episode and not a YouTube video like the ones that I've started doing a month or so ago. I hope you're enjoying them. They're like really sort of structured with 7-step processes to do this and 4 things to do that. No, this is not it. Today, I want to talk to you about what I'm seeing right now, right? No structure. And hopefully, as I start talking about them, I sort of think out loud, imagining that you're here with me. And the first idea that I decided to discuss with you today is this thing about being relatable, and being relatable being more powerful than being confident. I've touched on this before in some episodes, but I'm seeing this in my own work and I'm relating that to clients, and I'm then seeing that in their performance as well. And then the second is executive presence, because I recently spoke at a room full of very experienced women in tech, and that was the issue they wanted to talk about most. That's what the survey showed at the end of the presentation. And the third thing is something I've been thinking about and reading about a lot lately, and it's this idea of the new luxury. What feels sophisticated right now? What is chic right now? What feels valuable to people? Strangely enough, I think all 3 of these things are connected, and that's why I'm merging them. So I think they are. I hope they are. So that's why I want to talk about all of them with you today. So here we go. Okay, so something that I've been noticing lately, and it's that the more I stop trying to sound polished, the more you relate to me. I am authoritative, and I've built my confidence over the 7 or so years that I've been coaching. But being certain all the time and confident all the time in this chaos of an environment that we're living, it's not responding as well as me being relatable. So the more relatable I am, the better people respond to me. And I have been working with clients on adapting that to the work that they're doing as well when they're job seeking. That has made me think about something bigger that I'm seeing in careers and in the job market in general. And I hope that you get that, and please get back to me. And if you're a newsletter subscriber or if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'd love to hear from you about this because I'm really, really curious. I think what we're actually responding to now, what feels credible, what feels sophisticated, what makes somebody seem senior and confident and successful today. I think some of these things are changing. So let's go back to relatability, and maybe becoming more powerful that way, being more powerful by being relatable than being confident. It's something that I've been noticing a lot lately in the work that I do, and also convincing my clients to do that, to follow my lead, and seeing good results come to them as well. At the beginning of the year, I made a fairly strong statement on LinkedIn that I wanted to lean much more heavily into my expertise. I will try to find that post and link it in the episode show notes so you can go have a look. I didn't want to shy away from what I know anymore or, play around it. I wanted to be more intentional about what I shared and have stronger opinions about things I see in careers and in recruitment. And in many ways, that is me saying from now on, you will see very confident Renata showing up in LinkedIn posts. That was very well received, very well received. But something else also happened this year alongside that. And my newest newsletter, so if you're a newsletter subscriber, you may have noticed that I have become more relatable and have shared more of my personal experience in my newsletters. I've written about things that affect me personally and then connected those experiences with things that I see happening with my clients, for example. And interestingly, the open rates for my newsletter have gone up and up. So this is only like 2 weeks in, and I'm really impressed by how people responded to it. More people are replying back to my email to share, their situation and say thank you and say the newsletter really made them think. So that often happens if you send newsletters out to thousands of people. Some people will reply back, but I'm seeing that more now since I've made this really intentional switch to the content of my newsletter. More people are reaching out to me, that's for sure. And I keep coming back to this idea of being relatable. It beats being confident all the time. I've mentioned this in this podcast before. And perhaps confidence has become slightly overrated. Not because confidence isn't useful. Of course it is. And if you're listening to this episode and you are within the sort of target market for my podcast, you are very confident in a lot of things because you have an extensive career with lots of experience. But I think we've spent years teaching professionals that credibility requires certainty, that senior people should always know what they're doing, and that you need to sound composed, sound polished, and completely assured of yourself. And the world has changed. And I'm finding that increasingly people are not convincing enough because it's hard to keep up with the amount of change, and it's hard to be that confident all the time about your leadership, about where you're taking your company or your team or your project or your career. So why are very experienced professionals suddenly questioning whether they're still competitive, right? I see incredibly accomplished people questioning themselves because they believe they should be projecting this version of confidence that doesn't actually feel like them. Maybe you can relate to that. I know I certainly was feeling like that as well, and I had to sort of reflect on that during the new year. And maybe the answer isn't becoming more confident. I keep going back to this point, is it really confidence or is it something else? Maybe part of the answer is becoming more comfortable with being seen as you actually are. I think so many times I have worked with individuals, very experienced professionals with a lot of confidence in the work that they do. And they still come to me saying they struggle with confidence. I mean, this week I had a conversation with a prospective client about this. And she's prospective yet, and we only had 30 minutes and she's yet to sign up. But I'm listening and thinking, but is it confidence? Is it really confidence? You seem like such a qualified professional with so many important expertise and experience that is easily translatable in the job market. I mean, easily. I can see that easily. I'm sure that, the reason why she reached out to me is because she's not seeing it. But it's being comfortable with your ambition. It's about being comfortable with yourself. And, one of the things that I proud myself is helping people find that inner voice that makes them really crisp and clear when they're talking to people. I just wanted to share that. And that kind of leads me to the second thing that I wanted to talk about, which is executive presence. Does executive presence mean that you're having to perform to somebody else's expectations? I think that's how people still think about executive presence. That takes me to something that has been on my mind since I did that presentation to the Tech Women event. So I spoke at this event for You and You recruitment. If you're following me on LinkedIn, you may have seen photos or videos about it, which I have shared. There were close to 70 women in the room, mostly senior executives and also very experienced tech professionals. And I talked about 5 things that can become barriers in our careers. Confidence, because I find that most people that come to me as prospective clients, that's what they want. They want to be, they tell me they want to be more confident. And then once I start working with them, we better diagnose what the issue is. And that's what I explain. I often find that it's not really about confidence. They know that they can do the job that they're applying for. It's more about courage, about applying and reaching out to people. It's about executive presence, maybe doing the interview and conversations that they need to have to get that job. It's about tall poppy syndrome, which is a very Australian thing, about not feeling like you should aim or be more ambitious than you're supposed to. It's about imposter syndrome, where you may feel like you're not ready yet to take a job, even though you feel confident that you are. And then afterwards, You and You surveyed the attendees. And the topic that most people were interested in hearing more about was executive presence. I mean, I'm happy to come back, You and You, if you want to get me back to talk about that. I wasn't surprised because I see this often when I'm doing podcast episodes about executive presence, or even today we did a planning meeting with the YouTube team for the new YouTube videos. And I can safely say there are the 3 or 4 videos that will be just about executive presence. So I see this with my clients as well all the time, and the clients are a smaller sample of my larger audience. People know that they are competent. They know their subject matter. They know their expertise, but they're often wondering, do I come across as senior enough for this role that I want? Do I sound strategic enough to join the senior executives at their decision-making meetings? Do I have enough gravitas to aim for a job a little bit higher than the one that I have now? It's about commanding the room, isn't it? And then they start trying to imitate somebody else that they see commanding that room. And then I think that people misunderstand what needs to be done for you to command the room, right? And that's sometimes because we treat executive presence as though there is one correct way of being impressive. I mean, we've discussed this in other episodes. I'll put another episode here with some experts in this. It's not an old one, so you may have listened to it already. Because there isn't a one way of doing executive presence correctly. Someone can have executive presence and be really introverted and quiet. Someone can have executive presence and be really warm. Another one can be quite extroverted and playful. Someone can have executive presence and say they don't know something and still get away with it. So, being funny is also okay. I've always been leaning towards the funny, I don't know type of executive presence. That served me well. I haven't really had troubles. I mean, I like to think that people will look at my LinkedIn and see that I went up and up in my career, even though I did play those cards in conversations and during interviews. So, you have to use your strengths in your character, in your talents. If you're reflective and introverted, and you say wise words, then that's your executive presence, inspirational kind of leader. Someone that feels okay admitting that something has been difficult, I think, show incredible strength of character and therefore executive presence. So to me, this is all about increasing the connection and the self-awareness, the connection with the external audience that's listening to you, and the self-awareness of what you possess in yourself as your character strengths that you can use to persuade people about having you on board. Most of the time, I'm using these techniques to get people into jobs. So I hope that you can sort of listen to me today and start looking at, are you comfortable enough with yourself that you don't need to manufacture a persona for yourself when you're having those conversations? Because manufacturing a persona for yourself for job interviews is possibly the worst thing that you can do, because it will show, right? And this brings me back to vulnerability, to relatability. So I think that there is a strange contradiction here that is worth noticing. People think vulnerability might diminish executive presence, but sometimes the desperate attempt to hide vulnerability is exactly what makes someone appear less comfortable and less credible to an audience trying to investigate you as a potential candidate for a job. So how am I using this? So I'm using this reflection when I'm talking to clients privately. And that's stuff that I haven't really, I think, discussed in podcast episodes before or anywhere before, is that you may not need to become more polished in order to get your job. What you may need to do is stop fighting your natural style. You may need to trust your experience more and your talents and your strengths more. You may need to allow a little more of yourself into the room. And I know this sometimes is so hard. We really don't spend enough time getting to know ourselves in order to translate that well. And, the Find My Talents the Talent Predicts Strengths assessment test that I use is so good because it's designed just for this stage of people's careers, and it's so much easier once we use that to start preparing for interviews and conversations and professional pitches and whatnot. So I mean, it's not just about doing a strengths assessment test. It's allowing yourself the time to learn how to translate things that are probably normalized inside you into this way of communicating. And that leads me to this third idea that I wanted to talk to you about, which is what I am hearing and reading about the new luxury. The new luxury in the world right now is you not using AI. It's you slowing down and not being in a hurry, right? I think that there's this phenomenon that I've been noticing. You may have noticed as well. It's both in my own business, and it's also something I'm using already with my clients. It's something I've started talking about on my social media platforms. I just did an Instagram post about this. It's a trend, what's chic, what's kind of chic these days. And that kind of shows you, that all the things that are kind of chic are things that I want to talk to you about. What is luxury now? What feels sophisticated right now? And I'm going to tell you, it's not using AI. It's not learning about AI. And if you think about this for careers, because ultimately that's why you're here. That's why you're listening to the Job Hunting Podcast. The ultimate career luxuries is now having enough control over your career to the point where you don't panic, right? When you lose a job, when you're laid off, when you have a terrible boss, you just go, yep, no, I get it. I'll just leave this job and I'll get another one, right? Being made redundant and saying, okay, I'm going to take a month off. I'm going to, Byron Bay, Bali, Hawaii, Scotland. I'm just going to stop and think. I'm going to, catch up with my friends. I'm not applying for 50 jobs right off the bat. I'm going to work out what I actually want. That is such a privilege. That is sophistication. That is chic. That is cool, right? A lot of people can't afford to do that. And that's why cool things are cool. But there is something incredibly powerful about it. The same applies to career decisions generally, taking your time instead of accepting a role straight away or jumping into a job application straight away, saying no to opportunities that are not aligned with your purpose, with your goals for your career. I just told a client, again, another prospective client who applied for a job that clearly she didn't want and then got upset that she didn't get. And I said, but you just told me that sort of role doesn't suit you. Why did you say yes to applying for it? So, you know what I mean? So that's luxury, and not everybody can afford it. And frankly, in my career, I probably wouldn't be able to afford saying no to things. There were desperate times here in the Bernarde household where we just had to chase things without the luxury of, thinking about our career purpose. But not chasing every opportunity is definitely luxurious. Not trying to optimize every minute of your life by using AI to do everything for you is a luxury, right? Not needing to have immediate external validation, just being cool with yourself and not worry about what other people think about your career. That's luxury. There's a calmness to it that is really chic. And maybe that calmness is becoming a status symbol of sorts. I have noticed that a lot in the way that people are showing up for private coaching, for example. They could go to AI. They probably did. And I think I wrote about that recently on LinkedIn as well. If you're getting jobs using AI, good for you. I'm not seeing it. The people that reach out to me, I'm sure that they tried it before. But then if you think about it, it's because everybody has access to it now for free. It's what everybody is doing. And there's no uniqueness to the job application once everybody is doing. There is no standout applicants if everybody is doing the same thing. So when everyone can automate their applications, for example, then the handmade, thoughtful application becomes more valuable. When everybody can automate opinions or recommendations, then that time that you spend, that 1 hour that you spent with your coach becomes more valuable. In fact, your brain often we know that for sure, that the brain will learn more if you slow down the learning process. And I think that's why people find career coaching so transformative. And AI makes this even more interesting, doesn't it? Because almost everybody now has access to tools that can write for them. They can write their CVs using these tools. They can write the cover letters. We see so many LinkedIn posts that are written by AI. The comment sections of LinkedIn posts, it's just AI all over it, right? So we were discussing it this morning during my YouTube meeting with my team that's preparing the next script for me to deliver for you. And one of the episodes will be about this, about the fact that the content is now bot generated, right? Everybody's just not taking the time. So if everything you do, everything you say, every email you send, all the interview answers that you provide, if that's all AI, what's luxurious? What seems unique? The scarce thing is now the human input, right? Taking the time to write something yourself starts to feel different for you, and it starts to feel different for your readership. Having an actual conversation with somebody becomes more valuable. Sitting with an idea becomes more valuable, just taking your time. I also see that in culture. You probably have seen it as well. People now are buying physical books. Bookstores are on the up and up. People want to listen to records. They want to buy records. They want, cassette tapes, for God's sake. I've been seeing companies releasing cassette tapes again, and they're very expensive. Buying old cameras and taking photos with film, going to the cinemas, doing something slowly when they could have done it instantly. I'm assuming that this podcast, most of you are Gen X, but just go a few generations younger than us. That's what they're doing. My son has a friend and she's a DJ, and she's very proud of only using long plays records in her DJing. And I'm thinking, okay. I think that there is this cultural shift happening around us that maybe you're noticing it too. And definitely it's something that it's changing also our professional goals. Do we really want to be ambitious enough to achieve C-level roles, or do we prefer flexibility and a portfolio career? Many of my clients now are seeking that. That is the new luxury. It's time, it's flexibility, it's travel. Thinking for yourself, reading for yourself, knowing yourself, taking your time, and speaking in your own words, having real conversations with another human. I can see that, and my coaching has never done so well. So connecting it back to you, it could be quite reflective here to think that this may also partly explain something that you might be seeing in your job search, in your ambitions changing, in the way that you're sort of positioning yourself out in the world, the choices that you're making. And I think that now that you and everybody else has extraordinary access to information, you can ask AI almost any question, really. There are so many things that are out there free for you, like this podcast is one of them. There is no shortage of information, and yet people are still choosing to sit down with me for an hour and talk, or opting for this sort of slowness in their life, to include that in their life. And I don't think that they are necessarily paying for information, because information is freely available. What they're paying for is attention, perspective, judgment, a conversation that is entirely about them. somebody who remembers what they said 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago and notices that today they're saying something different. And I know that because it's increasingly how I spend my own money as well. That's how I invest my own hard-earned money. So when I value something, I want access to someone who has thought deeply about it, That feels increasingly luxurious to me. Okay, so are these ideas correlated or ad hoc? You tell me. I think that maybe these things have been on my mind and they have sort of interconnected themselves and weaved themselves into each other. Relatability, executive presence, slowing down, human expertise, doing things in your own words. I think that they all point towards the same thing in my view. It's a world where it has become incredibly easy to manufacture being polished. Perhaps we're becoming more interested in what feels real instead, right? And for those of us who are experienced professionals, particularly people around my age, I'm in my 50s, but 40s, 50s, 60s, I think that there is something quite liberating about that, but something that we may need to unlearn. The fact that you don't necessarily need to reinvent yourself into some shiny new persona to get a job, that perhaps the work is about you becoming more of yourself in those conversations, more comfortable with your experience, more deliberate about how you spend your time during those transition periods, and selective about what deserves your attention. And hopefully, willing to let people see that actually you are the human behind your CV, your LinkedIn profile, your job title. And I hope that I've given you a few things to think about over the coming days. There are now over 300 episodes of this podcast for you to listen to. I'm going to make a few suggestions in the episode show notes below based on this topic. If there are other topics that are kind of aligned to this, I'm going to suggest to you below. And I would love for you to go and review some of my YouTube videos that I've done specifically for senior managers. I'll put a link to my YouTube channel below as well. If you haven't checked it out, you will find that the podcast episodes are there, as well as these sort of videos designed specifically for YouTube. That's all that I have to say today. I'm actually glad that there was a change of plans and that I don't have a podcast guest to introduce to you, because then we can have this opportunity to have a quick chat and get things off my chest. Thanks for joining me. If you're still here, subscribe to my newsletter and I will see you next time. Bye.